Hello, and welcome to part 3 of Shakespeare Speaking the Speech. Today we're going to be looking at the monologue from Act 1, Scene 1 of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now you should have the link for your handout in the description below. Now I expect you guys warmed up and ready, so remember to watch our warm-up video and then come back for text analysis. Are you ready? Let's get started. A Midsummer Night's Dream is a very popular Shakespeare play. It's a comedy and it's performed all over the world, and it has been since it premiered hundreds of years ago. What may be surprising to you is that the setting is actually ancient Greece, thousands of years ago. But the play has so much universality. It's fun, it's easy to understand, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of comedy. It's a genuinely funny production. There are so many different choices you can make in terms of costuming and lighting. You can add music. It's a wonderful, wonderful play, and I'm really happy to share it with you today. Now, like a lot of comedies, it actually begins in kind of tragic circumstances, or at least the stakes are pretty high, more so than for most comedies. What we have is a situation where there's a girl, Hermia, and she wants to marry her boyfriend, Lysander. Pretty understandable. But her father wants her to marry another boy named Demetrius. Now, not only does Hermia not love Demetrius, but Demetrius already has a girlfriend, Helena. Although if you ask him, they're not together. Right, Demetrius. Now, the laws of Athens are very strict. And Hermia's father is so intent that she marry Demetrius that he basically says it's a matter of life and death. You do what I say, or you're going to go to a nunnery for the rest of your life, or whatever the ancient Greek equivalent is. So Hermia and Lysander concoct a plot. The way Greece was set up back then, there were different city-states. So Athens was one, Sparta was another, and so on. Now Lysander has family in another city-state, and they will look after him and protect him no matter what. So he says to Hermia, let's run away. Let's go to my other family. We'll be safe. We'll be married. We'll have babies and a beautiful life together. How can you refuse? So before she goes, she tells Helena what they're up to so that Helena won't worry for her. See, they've been best friends since they were babies. Right? Understandable. If you're never going to see your best friend again, you got to let her know what's going on. Now, Helena's very depressed. She's been really pushed around and done in by what Demetrius has done to her. And through this monologue, she realizes what she has to do. She's going to betray her best friend so that she can try and get Demetrius back by telling him that Hermia is running away. It's a tough decision, but in her mind, it's got to be done. Now, we learn all this through what's called a soliloquy. A soliloquy is a monologue that is conveyed to the audience. Soliloquies are actually very common, especially nowadays. This whole time I've been talking to you, technically it's been a soliloquy. A lot of YouTubers, streamers, they all talk in soliloquy because they are talking to somebody else. I'm talking to you right now, but you're not here. You are my audience. You're watching me, and I'm revealing my innermost thoughts to you. Now, in movies, we see this a lot of times in voiceover. Sometimes you'll hear the thoughts in a character's head played over the scene. A lot of times with film, we can convey the idea of a soliloquy. Like if you look at my face and then maybe we cut to a close-up of this globe, and you can infer that I'm maybe thinking about traveling. Or if earlier you saw me in a foreign country and then you cut back to me looking at this globe, you can infer that I'm thinking about the travel that I was already in on. Now in a play, obviously it's live, we can't do that. So we use a soliloquy instead to convey the thoughts of our character. So first, let's take a look at how this is written out. Now, Midsummer Night's Dream is pretty much all written in verse. And as we've stated before, verse and poetry are a way to convey many different ideas. Nobility speak in verse, and all the characters here are nobles. Youth tend to speak in verse because they are, sweet and innocent and perfect. And couples, or people who are in love, also tend to speak in verse. A lot of times, and we see it in this play, couples will actually speak in rhyming couplets. Now, we went over briefly what a rhyming couplet is in our sonnet piece, where it's 2 lines and they both rhyme. So A, B, B, C, C, and so on. So a couple who's very much in love may actually talk back to one another in rhyming couplets to show that their minds and their hearts are one. So we start off with this sort of back and forth idea, and then Hermia and Lysander leave Helena to continue this rhyming couplet. But because she's alone, she has to complete the couplets herself. So let's take a look at what she has to say. So again, we're in iambic pentameter, which is unstressed and then stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. How happy some or there some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she. So we've got A, our first rhyming couplet. But what of that Demetrius thinks. Now here's where we have to kind of slide these two syllables together. So you can give yourself a little swoop on the bottom so you know that we're going to slide these together. Not so, he will not know what all but he do know. B. And as he errs, doting on her, Mia's eyes, there's another one, Mia. So I admiring of his qualities, C. Things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity, D. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged. Again, winged. You can make yourself there a note or not. Winged Cupid painted blind. E. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes, figure unhe dehaste, F. And therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he is oft so beguiled, G. So now you can do the rest of this on your own. Remember to find anywhere where there may be an extra beat. I don't believe there is in this one, but of course we'll look through it. And then we'll get to the end. So now that we've got everything beated out here, we can now look at the text analysis. So like we said, this is a soliloquy where Helena is talking to herself a little bit, but she's also talking to the audience. Now, when we're looking at circles of presence, circle 1 is talking to oneself. However, we don't want to fall into the trap of being, completely in your own mind. There's ways where you can do that from time to time, and there are certainly ways in this soliloquy. For instance, when she decides what she's going to do, I will tell him of fair Hermia's flight. You can play that two ways. You can play that to the audience. You can say, I will tell him of fair Hermia's flight. Or it could be something you realize in the moment. I will tell him of fair Hermia's flight. And then you can come back. Always remember to come back. If you're going to go into the first circle, which you can for this one, remember to come back and engage the audience. You're talking to yourself, yes, as this character, but we talk to ourselves all the time, and a lot of times we do imagine that we are being viewed, that there is an audience who's watching us and sometimes judging us for the things that we do. Now, sometimes this can be a good thing. It'll stop us from doing something silly, but a lot of times it can be a bit of a burden too. So here, we want to make sure that we're engaging our second circle of presence. Also, what we're doing in this soliloquy is we are making an argument. So this might be something where we're trying to engage the audience, take them along on our thought process. So she says, love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes, figure unheedy haste. So Helena is talking to the audience and she's taking them through this sort of thought idea. She's describing Cupid the little cherub, the son of Venus. And she explains love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. He usually has a blindfold on. And she also says, nor hath love's mind of any judgment taste, wings and no eyes figure unheedy haste, because of course all cherubs have little wings. So she's making the argument that Demetrius could love her, if she wants his love again, she wants him to come back, but she's making the argument that love, because it has wings and no eyes, it can sort of go from place to place, which means that it could potentially come back to her. And the way she decides that this is going to happen is to betray Hermia and Lysander. So when you're playing this character, we never want to judge our characters. Everyone is the hero of their own story. Nobody's the villain, nobody's the bad guy. That's up for the audience to judge, not you. So when you're playing a character, you want to think of yourself as their biggest advocate. You are the one who's trying to convince everybody that you're right. Just like in real life, if you thought you were right and somebody else was wrong, you would try to do whatever you could to convince that person you're right. So when we're doing this soliloquy, let's think about how we can win the audience over to our side, to convince them that we're right. But we're also not forgetting our given circumstances, which is that we're sad, we're hurt, we're betrayed, and we have to do something about it. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at one way you could play this monologue. How happy some or other some can be. Through Athens I am thought as fair as she. But what of that? Demetrius thinks not so. He will not know what all but he do know. And as he errs, doting on Hermia's eyes, so I, admiring of his qualities. Things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind, and therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. Nor hath love's mind of any judgment, taste, wings and no eyes figure unheedy haste. And therefore is love said to be a child, because in choice he is so oft beguiled, as waggish boys in game themselves forswear, so the boy love is perjured everywhere. For ere Demetrius looked on Hermia's eyne, he hailed down oaths that he was only mine. And when this hail some heat from Hermia felt, so he dissolved, and showers of oaths did melt. I will go tell him of fair Hermia's flight. Then to the wood will he tomorrow night pursue her. And for this intelligence, if I have thanks, it is a dear expense. But herein mean I to enrich my pain, to have his sight thither, back again. So that was part 3 of Shakespeare Speaking the Speech. We want to thank you for joining us today. I want you to work on these monologues this week, and remember, you can video and send them to me. The link is down below. Get your parents' permission first, but we'd be really happy to see what you're working on. For all of us, we'll see you next week for another edition of Shakespeare Speaking the Speech.